Hello and welcome back. In this video, we're going to be finishing up our router. But before we do that, let's go and change some settings in our config. First off, let's change some settings in the XAMPP config for Apache. So if you click on your control panel and you go to Apache config here, and you browse Apache, your file explorer should pop up, and we can go into conf, extra, and then vhosts. I'm just going to drag that into VS Code real quick. Hold on, if it will allow me to. There we go. Okay, so this is what your config should currently look like. I'm just going to copy and paste this a couple of times because we're going to actually use some subdomaining later on. So all of this is going to point to the where it's currently pointing to in the document root, but we're going to change the server name. So I'm going to change the server name to API dot, and then we'll just do cms.test, and then we'll also do a cms.test here, and then we'll also do, let's say, admin.cms.test, and then do one more, and I'm going to change this to be let's see, we'll create a community. We'll call this community txrp.cms.test. And so this right here, we're going to route to the API. This will be the main site. Then this will be our admin site. And you know what? Let's change this from admin to dashboard. And then this txrp will actually be routed to a txrp community, which I guess we'll just call that Texas RP or something. We'll figure that out later. Now that we've done that, we need to open up a notepad file and run that as administrator. So mine's already opening to it because I've modified this before. So go to File, Open, and you're going to want to go to this file path, which is C:, your Windows System 32, the drivers and etc folder. Make sure that you go down and select all files, and you're going to open up this host file. Now, you should have this local host and then the 127.0.0.1. All you're going to do is copy that and paste it, and I'm just going to indent that. Okay, and I'm going to change this to match the subdomains that we put over here in domains. So as you see, we have this api.cms.test, so I'm just going to change that to be api.cms.test. And then I'm going to copy and just paste this several times. 1, 2, 3. I think we only had 3 other domains that we created. So we had that cms.test. And then we also had dashboard.cms.test. And then that txrp.cms.test. Okay. So when we save that, and we can now close out of that, open up XAMPP, and if you have XAMPP Apache already started, go ahead and stop it and then start it again. Now, if you messed up anything here, XAMPP won't start up correctly, so all you have to do is just go down and delete everything all the way up to that first one, and then recopy and paste it, and make sure that you only change the specific parts that I changed. So now that we've done that, if we go and open up a Chrome tab here, and we'll use this right here, then we'll just do a cms.test, just to make sure, as you can see, it still works, and that's what we want. Okay, so now that we've done that, there's one more thing that we're going to change, and we're going to go into our config here, and I'm going to go ahead and just add one more replace, and I'm going to replace that with a dot. And then I'm going to copy this, And I'm also going to put it in our function down here, just so that way we can actually call this any way that we want. So what I mean by that is if we go back to, I think, yeah, in our bootstrap, we actually have this here. What we can do is we can do this default dot, and I forgot, hold on, forgot what default action. Okay, so if we do default dot action, and this actually might error, let me just check and see if that, no, it doesn't. Okay, so as you can see, we can do default dot action. It can be lowercase or capitalized, it doesn't matter. You can do default dash action, underscore action, and you can add as many changes as you want to that, just so that way it adds, you can use any characters that you want. The whole idea is to be able to get the config like that. So now that that's done, we can finish up our router. So if we go to our router core here, now we did our get, post, put, delete, our payload, and then we created this get controller function and the handle not found, invoke callback with arguments, and then this push and redirect. Now, there are two more functions that we need to create. The first one is to handle our API endpoints, and all that is it's going to basically just include our endpoint and then allow us to actually use that and determine if it is in fact an endpoint or not. So let's go ahead and get started. And now I did originally code this, but we're gonna change because I actually have the original application on my other monitor, so I'm periodically looking at that. And because of the way that I'm changing things up, we're gonna go off script here and change some of this function up. So protected function handle API endpoints, and we're gonna take in a request method. Okay. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're actually going to look for this API. So if you remember, we have in our app this API folder, version 1 endpoints. Let's go ahead and go into our dev config real quick, and I'm going to set a config set, and then we're going to do API version, and then we're going to say that that's version 1. Okay. So now we can go back to our router. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to say if file underscore exists root, not root, sorry, API dot, and then we're going to look into, so we're in this API folder. So next we're going to look for that config, and then that was API.version. And then it's going to be, and this is the wrong auto. Okay. So we're going to first look for, why is it, there we go. Okay. So it's going to look for that API version, and then we have that endpoints folder. So we're going to go into endpoints and put another directory separator. Now inside this endpoints, this will be something like /users / something else. We have no idea what that's going to be. So first we're going to write a .php, and in front of that we're going to concatenate the URL. So our URL, which we haven't actually written that function yet, so all I'm going to do is I'm going to say that the URL is going to be equal to the request method. So URL is equal to and request method. And so we're going to get this request method. We're going to pass in the actual file name. So this could be user / and but that's going to be passed in as an array. So we're going to get the first item in that. So $URL1. And technically that's the second item, not the first. So the first would be 0, but we're not getting the first item. We're getting that the second item. Okay. So if that exists, we're going to say that the URI is now equal to the URL because we'll need that URL later. So $URI, and we're going to set that equal to URL, and we're going to just array shift that URI. And we're going to do this twice. So essentially we're getting rid of the first two elements. Now, if there's anything left, those are going to be parameters that we pass through. So what I mean by parameters is if you remember, we have this payload here. And so let's say that we want to get parameters, so like a user ID, for instance. Well, we would create that function and the URL would look something like api.cms.test/users. And then on that, so this right here would be the zero, because originally it was going to be API/users like so, but because we're actually appending that API to the front, we need to go and change this API from 1 to 0, because now that's going to be the first item that's passed through. And we don't need to ship it twice, we only need to ship that once. As I said, I pre-wrote some of this code here on the original MVC that I made years ago, and now I'm redoing that MVC, and so things are going to be changing. I'm be using better and newer technologies and newer methods of doing things. So now that we know that this is going to be the first item, we're going to change it to 0. And so it will turn out to be like, for instance, user with the username of, let's say, a user name. Okay, so this right here would be passed as a parameter. So anything after this array shift, we know is part of the payload. So if we do $, actually no, we need to check if the array is empty first. So if not empty, then $URI. Then we can say $this underscore payload, and we're just going to reset that to make sure it is in fact empty, just in case it's something for whatever reason it's not empty. And then once we are sure it's empty, we're going to push the array, so array underscore push, and we're going to say that $this underscore payload, and then we're going to pass in this URI. And so that's what's going to be left. Now, we also need to require the actual file, because we're checking to see if it exists. Now we need to actually require it, so we're just going to say require once, and it's going to suggest this up here, so that's perfectly fine. And then if for whatever reason this file doesn't exist, we're going to do $this and then handle not found. Now, if you remember our handle not found right now, it just kills the page because it's not found. Later on, once we finish up actually writing the functionality for the controller, we're going to pass it through. If it's an API, then it's going to return this HTTP code, but it's not actually going to return the controller. And if it is an actual page, it's going to return this page not found controller instead. See, I'm getting an error. Bet you I just forgot to put a apostrophe somewhere. Let's see. Where is this error? Let me just refresh and see where that error is. It's not going to show me where that error is. some reason I'm having trouble seeing this error. Looks like it's gonna be in this first or second line. So open. Oh, here it is. Config get. Okay, that's what it is. Is it still giving me? It's still giving me an error. It's this time it's lower, somewhere around here. Ah, here it is. So, okay. Oh, not set. Good. Okay. That will fix the errors. Now we've got one more function to write. And so this function's going to be the actual router. So if we go to up here, we're going to say public function, and then I'm just going to call this route. And it's going to take in a URL. And actually, you know what? Technically, it doesn't need this URL, so we'll decide later if I want to pass a URL through it or not. So it's going to take a request method, and this request method is going to be equal to the server request method, which it is already, that's the beauty of Codium. Okay. Now, we're also going to say that $URI. No, I'm not going to use that. We're going to request URI, or we're going to use this request method, and we're going to explode on this URI. So $request not underscore, we're just going to use URI. We're going to set that equal to explode. Now, this is going to explode on the slash in the route, like in the URL, and we're going to pass in this server and then request underscore URI. And so, I misspelled the explode function. Okay, so that way you can see like what this actually is. Let me go into the bootstrap file real quick, and I'm just going to echo server request underscore URI. So as you see, this little slash. So everything after the slash here is this URI. So let's say that we do slash users, and we look for a user by the name of DAG. Well, as you can see, this URI becomes slash user slash DAG. When we explode on that, it actually creates an array. So if I copy what we did on our router here, and if I copy this explode, and we're actually going to have to var dump this. We'll just say $URL is equal to, and that, and then var dump $URL. You'll see exactly what it does. As you can see, it creates this array. So the first line in this array is actually an empty string. Well, we don't want that. So we need a way to get rid of that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a ternary operator. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do if empty $sign request URI. So if that's empty, and in fact, I can just use the isset, but I'm not going to. I'm just going to see if it's empty or if it's equal to an empty string. And I actually want this to be a ternary operator. So if it's empty to an empty string, then what we'll do is we'll array shift. So use this little question mark, and we'll say that array underscore shift, and we'll say $request URI, or it'll be equal to just empty string. It actually needs a second. There we go. Okay. No, that's not it. Just reason it doesn't like this. So if empty or You know what? We'll just use the is set then, since this ternary operator doesn't want to work for me right now. Is set, and then request URI, say and then we'll say that $sign request URI 0 if that's equal to an empty string. Then we'll use this ternary operator, which actually I apparently put this in the is set, so let me just remove that out of the is set. There we go. If it is set and that's set to true, then we just want to array shift the request URI, else we're going to just leave that as an empty string. So if that is in fact empty now, so if it's still empty, then we're going to use this if else statement. So if not empty, $request URI, and the your request URI. Ooh, actually no, that's not what we can't do that. So we're actually going to use a different method because this would request something that doesn't exist. Just close that. So what we're going to do is we're going to actually grab the entire URL. So I don't remember the off the top of my head, so I'm just going to go and Google it real quick. PHP server underscore PHP gets main. So this right here, that's what it is, HTTP host. Okay. So I'm just going to copy this real quick. And back here, and we're going to say that $domain is equal to, and then server HTTP host. Okay. And we're going to say that $sub is equal to, you know what? There's actually a better way to do this. Let's go into the dev config. We'll say that sub is equal to, and we'll paste this $server HTTP host, and then we'll do say that config sets api.subdomain is equal to sub, and we're just going to say that let me just sub is equal to, will explode on the dot, sub is equal to sub 0, and we'll just do api.domain. No, we'll do subdomain, just domain actually, and we'll get rid of that. Clean this up by just doing this. Back to clean that up even more by doing this, and then that, and then this. Get rid of that and this. Okay. So now this actually needs a second closing brackets. Okay. So if we go to our bootstrap file and we do var dump config get domain, var dump, and then config gets, okay. Go back to here. refresh that. So as you can see, it's cms.test. So this only gives 2 of them. We need 3 for that to be the case. So what we'll do is now I think we can use the count function here. So let's just var dump count on that real quick. See if it will let us. So yeah, it allows us to use the count function. So what we're going to do is we'll get rid of this. So we'll go back to the router. And what we're going to do is we're going to say that domain is equal to config get domain. And we're going to count. Let's say that $x is equal to count $domain. And then if $count x is, we'll say greater than, say equal to exactly 3, and this actually is 2. If it's equal to 3, and I am writing this as I go, so there may be errors later as I try to troubleshoot this, but we'll figure that out when we get to it. So we're gonna see if this is equal to 3. If it is, we're gonna say that $sub is equal to $domain 0, and that will be the first one. Else, we're gonna say that $sub, and I accidentally put sub, not sub. $sub. We're just gonna set the equal to an empty string. And now that we've finally got that, we can write if not empty $request URI, and this $sub is equal to API. Then we're going to this and then handle API points, and we're going to use this request URL. Now, if this is not the case, we're going to handle auto routing. And it looks like $sign request method request URI. Let's handle auto routing. Now it looks like I didn't actually create this handle auto routing, so let's go ahead and create that real quick. Move this up a little bit. So this is going to be a protected function. Essentially, this is going to do something similar to this handle API endpoints. So what we're going to do here is we're going to create a protected function, handle auto routing, and this is going to pass in segments. So we're first going to see if is set $segments 0, and if it's empty, then we're going to also check segment 0, and if it is in fact empty, we're going to array shift that, and then if it's not empty, we're just going to set this equal to an empty string. Now what we're going to do is we're going to say $controller is equal to is set $segments 0, and if it's not empty segment 0, then what we're going to do is UC first, and let's get the UC first. No, it didn't. Okay, so let me just UC first, and then the segment 0. Okay, and then it's going to get this default controller, which we set up in here as home. So it will, in fact, let's UC first that as well, just in case. Okay. Now this is the controller, $action, and we're going to set that equal to is set $segments 1, and if it's not empty, segments 1, we're just going to do the same thing, but we're not going to UC first this. Instead, we're going to concatenate an action. And by default, in our dev, we have this index, and we're also going to concatenate action to that as well. And so whatever function we create, it has to be something action. So it'll be like in our controller. So this user, and it would actually be something more like users view, and this view would be a function in our controller, such as view action. And it would be named view action, but in the URL it would only be view. And this concatenation sort of acts as like a security type buffer. Okay, so now that we have the action, all we have to do is, I think I actually created some code down here, the handle. I thought I created a function like get controller or something like that. Route, handle auto routing, get controller. Yeah, I did. Okay. So I created that get controller function, and in this get controller function, I lost it already. Here it is. It checks to see if this file exists for the controller. If the file exists, then it handles the routing for us and does all the callbacks. So all I have to do now is go back to this handle auto routing function and say that $this, and then get controller, and then pass in the controller and action, and then need to wait to, let's see, actually, we're always going to be this use args, and this use args, we're going to take the segments, $segments, arrays, and we're going to set that equal to array underscore shift segments, and we're going to do that twice. In fact, we'll just do this twice like that, and then just say brands is equal to $segments. Oh, actually, it already shifts the segments, so I don't even have to do that. I can just do $segments. Yeah, it actually already shifts that. That there. Okay, so we're actually shifting the segment up here. So because we're shifting that in the, actually no, we don't shift that. So I will need to shift this. So array underscore shift segments and do this. So if it's not empty, segment 0, that's that, and then does that. So the best way to do this, because it's already grabbing that there. If it's not empty, Well, you know what? Actually, if it's not empty, we can still pass in the segments because essentially, this if this is empty, then nothing's going to wind up being passed through anyways. So it's just going to be an empty array that's passed through. So it's perfectly fine. But if it does wind up being empty, that's where we'll run into a problem. So let's see. The easiest way to do that is if the the segments, then what we'll do is we'll just array shift segments, and then we'll actually check that again one more time. So essentially, if there's no if there's a controller, it'll shift it, and then if there's an action, it'll shift it, and then anything else we know will be params, so that will get passed through. But if it is empty, an empty array will get passed through, and that's exactly what we want. Auto routing. I'm just gonna copy this, paste it there. Okay, that's exactly what we want. Um, So it checks to see if it is if there's an empty string. If there's not an empty string, it or if there is an empty string, it shifts the array. But if there is, it just creates an empty string and it doesn't actually pass that to the array. Then it creates a controller. If there is an item in the segments array and it's not empty, then it creates this UC first item. So in our example here, we have slash users and then slash view. So this will be the controller, this will be the action. So you see first that user, and then it goes down to the action, and it then checks to see if there is an action. So that view, if it is set, then that view action will have the view and then it concatenates action. If it's not set, it goes to the default action and then concatenates action to that as well. And then this checks the segments array to see if there is currently anything set. If there is, it gets rid of the first item, does it again, gets rid of the second item, and then if there's a and then it passes it into this get controller, which the get controller function just finds the actual class and then calls the class. So that's going to conclude our second part of the router. If you enjoyed this video, thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video.